Hello ladies, welcome to Homemakers Radio. I hope you get a lot done while you listen, like we did in the olden days. When we were washing dishes, we had the radio on. And so today I have quite a few things to talk about. We'll start out with your appearance, and then we'll go on to just a few things about value of homemaking, and then maybe into some getting along with family and with people stuff. Everybody likes that. It's always amusing. And so if you are new here, please click on the link that I provided in the description box on YouTube and go over to the page which I have posted this video on and see the other things that go with it. And also you may leave a comment there if you like. And ladies, I really am honored that you came here because this is so much better. I love this era that we're living in. Even though I am elderly, I love the new things and the new technology and the opportunities that it provides that before were so difficult. You know, to get a group of women together was a lot of effort. You had to have your everything prepared. You prepared your home, or if you were going to speak somewhere else, there was travel was involved, and ladies had to leave their homes. Now you don't have to leave your home, and it doesn't cost a lot of money or any. And so this is just ideal. And so if you would like to click on continuous play when you're finished with this over on the left. Now some have said that the last video I did didn't work on continuous play, and I've tried to fix that. And I hope that that is in operation now. And then you can listen more while you finish something. Now, I try to stay on long enough that you can get something done. For myself, I've got my favorite things I listen to, and I never listen to myself, or I would just delete everything because I find out all the mistakes I've made and just not want to tolerate it. And I can understand that when you don't like some of the videos that I tell you that I'm watching, like my exercise videos, and you'll go through and find something that you don't like that she's posted, and I can understand that because I'm that critical with my own. So I would like to welcome you to the manse. I'm sitting in the little room that I've done in black and white. I never thought I would do something like this. Years ago, when the black and white look was promoted in decor, there was a house tour that was promoted by some organization, and we went with some ladies in church and looked at it, and we didn't like it, and because they had done this room up in black and white, we just didn't like it. But it caught on later on, and it had more life in it and more warmth, and they were putting things in it that gave it a little bit more appeal. And I really enjoyed doing this room in these colors. It's for the boys in the family when they come, for the grandsons. And I even have, it's a woodsy room. I haven't named it yet, but I really would like to do that. And so I would like to welcome you to the manse and to captivity. I'm speaking from captivity. I have had an interesting day. I got ready to come here and to broadcast, and then there was a text saying someone was on their way over, and they had been in the area. And when they come out this far, and I live out in farmland, when people come out this far, they're not going to drive past, so they wanted to come over, and they knew they would get a good cup of tea here. So they came over, and I was talking to them about some of the things that I have spoken here about, and one of them being the captives of the Bible. And I brought up Joseph to them and showed them how he didn't just kind of sit there and wait it out. And he was in captivity. First he was stolen and put into captivity, and then he went into jail, into prison, while he was in captivity. So he just had a double dose of being isolated. And yet in prison he did some of his greatest work in his with his wisdom and his knowledge, and we know God was with him. But I was trying to describe to them about how he was so young, and he did not just sit there and say, well, I'm a captive, I can't do anything. All of us have an obligation to our Creator and to Christ to always live out the principles that we have espoused and the scriptures that we follow. You don't quit that. You don't lose your creativity. You don't lose your mind. You shouldn't lose your mind. You should have a very active mind. even in captivity. Now, I say captivity because I have been here almost 150 days, just like Noah in the ark, but I'm living on property. I have beautiful view. There's plenty to do around here. I'm next to the meeting house, the church building. There's plenty of activity going on. I walk back and forth. I do things over there, and I also have, it seemed like just as soon as people found out I was in that captivity, they wanted to visit those in captive, like the Bible says. You know, we don't really have much opportunity to do that, do we? So I have had a steady stream of visitors, and it's been so interesting. But this last bunch that came were some ladies that had been out in the area at a special Whole Foods farm shop, and so they wanted to come over. And I was talking about Joseph and how interesting that was, all that he accomplished. He not only saved the Pharaoh's land from famine, but he saved his own people eventually. And so they were, one of the women that came out had a Facebook page and an account where she was teaching live how to do art journaling. And so she showed it to me, and she showed me some of the art that she'd done. It was just so appealing and so beautiful. And she was talking to me about special watercolor brushes, and she was telling me about this one that was a feather brush that would make calligraphy feathery and beautiful. And that she told me that the Japanese ladies liked that one, or the Japanese men too, when they were doing art, liked that one the best. And she showed me the effects of it and on some of the pictures. And I asked her, could you come over and show me how to do that? And she said, sure. And then she started telling me how you could make your own canvases out of an old white t-shirt and a cereal box, and how you could make a canvas to paint on. And I said, could you come over and tell me how to do that too? So then, and she was about 22, and her mother was with her, and her mother had told me about some kind of ladies' day get-together she'd had at her house, or she'd hosted at her house, and she was telling me about these, how to use an old paint bucket, and how she used to take a paint bucket and take the label off and clean the inside out, and you could do so many things with it, both decoratively and then also for some kind of hospitality. But she had found some clear ones online that were not used, and you could order them new, and what you could do with them, what you could fill them with. And she'd had a movie night for someone a couple of years ago, and how she'd filled that with various things. It was very interesting. So I said, could you come and show me how to do that? Well, then they got to talking about other people that they knew that they had learned something from, and I also knew several women who did things. Like, I know several women, like I offered, I said, well, they wanted to know, could we have a get-together, and we could call it a captivity captivity class or something, where called Teach Me Something. So I had been talking to them about how I had attended a modeling class in the school that this lady had that was in the church, and she had turned it into more of a grace and etiquette thing, you know, teaching women how to conduct themselves and how to stand and sit and behave gracefully and modestly in dresses, and how to there's an woman online that tells you even how to retrieve something while you're sitting in a chair if you drop something. And just interesting little bits that people generally around this area are not interested in, but these women knew people who would have enjoyed that. And also, so we decided to have a get-together, a captive get-together, and called Teach Me Something. And so that's what we're going to do, and everyone is going to present something they know that you don't know that you would like to learn. And it's going to be very interesting. We're supposed to be in such captivity, but we're together. And we talked a lot about some of the captives of the recent era, like in the 1800s and 1900s, and how they learned, they were given a kind of a warehouse where they could conduct classes, learn to cook and sew, and the men would learn to build, and they all left captivity knowing how to do something. So instead of moaning and groaning about it, we can come out of the other side better. This is the challenge that I have for you as a homemaker. Most people are home anyway now, even if you're not used to homemaking. The challenge I have taken up is I want to come out of the other side of it better. I want to be a bit stronger. I want to know something new. I want to have more skills and more talents. I want to finish something that I started and finally get at something that I have been trying to do for years and never could because I was always on the go, always out having to do something somewhere else. So I'd like to challenge you to come out smarter, come out the other side of this, smarter, better, happier, wiser, and more innovative, more enthusiastic, and more positive. And I think by the end of it all, some of us are going to wish we had more time and that wish that we'd used the time better. I was talking to someone the other day that said if she had begun to go for a walk every day, she would have gone for 150 walks by now, and would have helped her more than sitting around watching the news. And now the media, they're a propaganda machine. They're not going to give you any hope. So, and you'll have nothing to show for it. You'll probably need, you can substitute the amount of time you pay attention to the media. It's only going to demoralize you at home. It's only going to depress you to have those reports in your home. You could substitute something. Substitute a stretch exercise. Substitute a song. Learn something. You can learn just about anything now that you've always wanted to do, and almost free too. Just substitute that, and also realize you're not going to be isolated even if you stop listening to the media, because somebody's going to text you, somebody's going to phone you, and somebody's going to tell you. You'll be caught up with it. Somebody will tell you. Now, remember that was it Elizabeth Bennet in the 1995 Pride and Prejudice who said, "My courage always rises with every attempt to intimidate me." So this is just a springboard to, this isolation and captivity can be a springboard to something great. And so use it as a signal for your courage to rise. Instead of, we were taught when we were growing up on the homestead, when and there always was some disappointment, because we'd think that the snow had melted, we were going to get in the car and we're going to drive to the end of the road and go up on the highway, end up and go to town and get everything we needed. And it was such a bright thing that we could go away from this isolation and this place that was in the wilderness and go to town. It was always so exciting. We'd get all ready to go, and the car would get stuck. And we'd work on it. My parents would put branches and logs and everything under the wheels to get traction, and would finally get out of the stuckness, but then it was dark and we'd have to all go home. So there was always a disappointment, always or you would think you were going to have, someone was going to come and they couldn't, and there was always a disappointment. So we were taught to substitute something great for disappointment and to use it as an opportunity for something else. So my mother always had something at home that we could do to better ourselves, whether it was, she used to order these kits, like an art kit. In the winter, she knew that we would be there for 9 months, maybe not get out very much, and especially winter. So from catalogs, she would order kits for the children. They would be art kits or sewing kits or knitting kits, and the boys would have, we could interchange them too, because the boys in our family all learned to knit. And we could have, they would have little kits that made of wood for woodworking, and they'd build little airplanes that actually flew. And they had other types of interesting kits. You can get things like that today, and even better. And so we always had something to look forward to that we could learn and grow from. And she was always good about telling us stories too. But I want to start out by showing you my teacup. So now you can, after you've seen this, you can go and get dressed, which is something I really emphasize. And I wanted to show you this because it's kind of woodsy, and it goes with this woodsy room that I'm in. As a matter of fact, I still have a lit tree, a fake tree up in the corner, because it goes with it. There's no decorations on it. It's just got some lights, which I really like. We need it this time of year. It has a little deer on it, and there's a forest on this plate, and it's an antique, which I don't use. The antiques have tiny little handles, and most people, the children don't like them either. They get their fingers stuck in them, so I just use them for decor, and I've replaced most everything with a newer cup. But this one goes with the room, so I wanted you to see that, and it's by Imperial Fine Bone China of England, and there's no name of the design, so it must have just been a one-time gift item. And so the first thing that I always ask you to do is make sure that you've taken care of your appearance. Now, why does it matter if you're isolated, if you're at home, and you generally have to work alone at home, even if there are other people, members of the family around, because homemaking is not like a group activity. Even when you do it as a group, there's one person cleaning up one thing, and another person straightening up something else, and another person doing something else. It's pretty hard to crowd around the laundry room and everybody do the laundry together. So you have to learn to work alone. It's a great advantage because it makes you self-motivated and self-employed. And you have to just remember Elizabeth Bennet's quote, "My courage always rises with every attempt to intimidate me." So if you feel intimidated by that laundry, or you feel intimidated by your kitchen, that's a signal for your courage to rise. And what you think is, I am not going to let that pile of laundry defeat me. I am not going to let this house defeat me. And don't allow it to the Bible teaches a self-control of mind over matter, of controlling things that cause you to have setbacks, rather than letting life control you. You control life. And it teaches that. If you look that up and look up the word self in the Bible, you'll find a lot of things about this attitude, that you cannot sit around and wait for things to happen. You cannot wait for a friend to come over and clean up your house. I mean, she may do it eventually, but if you really want to have life better now, then you have to learn to do it yourself. So you become self-employed in a sense, which is just great, because from there you can learn from homemaking and housekeeping. And by the way, you need to be going now to get your appearance taken care of. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about appearance because, the very people that will tell you that it doesn't matter what anyone wears are people that will choose items of clothing to wear that does matter to them. They like things a certain way, although they like to give you the impression that they don't care what they wear. That if they don't care what they wear, why is one preferred over another? Why would they prefer to dress in a sloppy way, or maybe clothing that shows certain parts of their body more prominently than others? Why would they choose those if it doesn't matter? Because if it didn't matter, then they could choose something that was really modest. And so you have to ask yourself when you're getting dressed, even at home, if you have little children especially, consider their height and what they see when they're walking next to you. And one of the things that I've noticed with some of the young women that like to wear long skirts is the children will grab onto the skirt, and there'll be something they like to look at the skirt. And sometimes there'll be a little pattern on there of some little animal print or some little floral print. And these children just love this, and this is their first impressions of beauty and of life. And so I think it's really important to think about that, their height and what are you wearing. And it also have to ask the question, the way you dress, what is it about the way you dress that attracts the eye? What areas of your body does the way you dress emphasize the most and bring the most attention and attract the eyesight too? And think about that, because really the way you dress should be up so that the eye of whoever sees your face, and it's not the same as little children, but even with little children, you have to be careful how you dress around them, because it gives them the impression that they're going to live with all their life of of what is lovely. And so ask yourself, is the way I dress attracting the eye to my soul, to my personality? And so it should always bring the eye upward. And so also, there's nothing wrong with wearing beautiful clothes, beautiful flowery skirt. And I have over the years heard the news media ridicule it, not the news media, but just the media, like talk shows and programs over the years, that they'd have a fashion designer that was promoting her or his designs. And so in order to do so, they had to completely trash the previous love for roses or flowers or big collars or lace, completely down it so that they could promote their ugly designs. And there was someone who was sending me some clips from a talk show where someone was promoting these designs and getting women to model them, and they really didn't flatter the person's personality or their body or anything like that. And mostly black, I think, mostly black things, black dark colors, no cheerful colors, no yellow, no pink, no, just mostly like they were in mourning. And in the olden days, people reserved black for special occasions where they had to show dignity or respect. And it wasn't an everyday wear. I know I'm wearing it today, but it has to go with the room. And so, and what do you wear that? How do you dress that is cheering you up and cheering others up and giving children the idea that it's going to be interesting to wake up today and see what my mother wears? Just think about that. And I'm in an area, I think all of you are probably in an area, if you are more interested in clothing and you like to wear long skirts and long dresses, that you're probably quite alone. And there's probably no one around you that agrees with that. But it's like an intimidation in a way, so don't let it intimidate you. Wear whatever you wear with grace. While we don't judge people by how they dress, I like to encourage them to dress in a feminine, beautiful way. And so I've been talking a little bit about the housework, because if you don't first of all, if you don't get dressed and you don't try to look pretty and get your hair done and your skincare taken care of, then the housework just becomes drudgery, and it's very repetitive anyway. And it's nice to have something to listen to, and that's why I'm making these videos. So go over to my site and listen to these videos there. But if you don't take care of yourself first, it's almost like you don't have a start. It's like you don't have a point of beginning. So the first thing you have to do when you get up, well, or just before you go to work in your home, is to prepare for it and to get ready for it. And I wanted to show you what I use on my skin. And this is Glycerin Soap. It doesn't have to be this brand. This is called Pear's Glycerin Soap, and I got it at the Dollar Tree before captivity. It lasts a long, long time. Always wash my face with this. And then I make myself something that's like a cream or an oil by filling a jar like this full of hardened beeswax and the hard coconut oil and a few other oils. And then I put a drop of frankincense in it, frankincense essential oil in it, or some other, just one drop of something else, and this will be quite full. And then I will stick the jar in a pan of water and let it heat in that water on top of the stove, on top of the heat, and till it melts, and then it can be mixed really well. And then of course it will harden a little bit more, but the consistency is soft enough that you can spread it on your skin. And so I've been using that for a while, trying that, and eventually would like to start making my own cosmetics. I won't tell you what the cosmetics I use are right now, but if you'd like to email me and ask me, I will tell you. I don't want to promote any particular brand over another, or meet the ire of the ones that don't believe in wearing anything. So Now, I have been going through, so go through your house first. I have to leave a list beside my bed so that when I wake up I don't get disoriented and I have a cup of tea, and then I get out of, I have my tea stations, you know, all over the house, and I have one beside my side of the bed, so I don't have to get up and I can just turn it on and enjoy that luxurious cup of tea, look at my list for that day, check my email, and then get up and go and get prepared. Because when you're preparing yourself, at least I find, and by the way, ladies, this is my opinion based on my experience and my life. So it's up to you to choose your experience and your opinion, and you're not obligated to follow anything that I say or do. This is just my opinion. And so that's what I do, and then I head to the bathroom to get ready for the day, but I'll look at my list, and I always begin with some of them, just the major things, like making sure the kitchen is clean, and I try to do that before I go to bed, but sometimes other people stay up later, and it's not always the way I like it. And I've got several things that I need to do, and I always try to tidy up the house in general, just in case I have some of that drop-by company, and I'm always glad that I do. And thankfully, I live far enough away from people that it takes them 15 to 20 minutes to get here, so I can always rush around and put things away. And so getting dressed is so important. I take exercises, but and the exercise clothing is so comfortable. It's very tempting to keep going and cleaning up afterwards. But I find that usually someone will come and I'll be embarrassed. So it's best to get dressed, I find. I've been taking you through the Bible so that you'll be familiar with it, because I'm homeschooling you too. I don't care how old you are. And we're stuck in Genesis because I found, and I want you to know what's in it, and based on mainly the characters. So I was stuck in Genesis, and I took you through and tried to, so that you could know what's in it. It's the creation, which is the first verse of the Bible. The creation, you need to know that. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Do you know, I've heard people say that if you don't know anything else, know that verse, because it's the basis of your faith. And after that, there were the 6 days of creation. And it's interesting, as I was going through this, thinking I'm going to give you the timeline again of who came first, you know, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. And I'm going to do that again today, but I observed something else. Every time you read, I am going to go on, and we are going to go through other books. But this one has me interested because it's interesting of the 6 days of creation, the 5 days, the first 5 days, were all the things that were created that would be necessary for man to come along, for man to exist. He'd have to have light, he'd have to have water, he'd have to have vegetation, he'd have to have all the things that were created the first 5 days, you know. So when that was all created, when the earth was all set up and created, and there was a job created too for Adam, then Adam and Eve were created. So I think that's really interesting. You know, it's kind of like our house too, you know. Have to get that all situated and settled down before you can really have a meal or feel human. So I thought that was interesting, that all these things, because he could have created man first, but what could he do? So he created a world for him to be in, and for something for him to do. So then after Adam and Eve, then there is the serpent and the tree of good and evil that they were not to eat from, and then there was them being expelled from the garden, and then the story of Cain and Abel, and the story of the flood, Noah and the flood. God saw that the world was increasingly wicked, and he created a flood. And today you can study, you know, someone sent me a comment, I'm sorry I didn't go back and get it, about a book that had been written about the ark, about living on the ark, and all the work that would have been done during the 150 days. And it rained 40 days and 40 nights, and then they were on the ark for 150 days, I think. I need to check that for sure. And I'm just talking to you like if you were sitting here in front of me, and so I'm not going to edit out a bunch of stuff. And if you were sitting here conversing with me about some of these subjects, you would not be editing it all out. We would just be kind of mentally excusing some things. So excuse me if I don't get it completely right. But God made a covenant with Noah, shown by the rainbow, that he would never again curse the ground and flood the earth. Destroy the whole earth by flood. Didn't mean there wouldn't be any floods, just that he would not destroy mankind or with a flood. And then it describes all of Noah's descendants, and it started with his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And this is an interesting part because I haven't mentioned this to you before, but right after Noah got out of the ark and they started their farming, their grapevines, it describes all these sons and grandsons of each of these 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It says Shem was the father of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and Ham was the father of, and it mentions all these things. And then comes the Tower of Babel. And it's only in one chapter, or half of a chapter. It's only 10 verses. It mentions the Tower of Babel, and where their language was mixed up, and people had to go to a group where they understood the language. And this is where we get the belief that the nations were created at the Tower of Babel. Well, I made the mistake of looking this up, and I came upon the Wikipedia description, and they called it a myth. And they said this is what Christians use as a myth for the explanations of how the nations began. It really made me mad. But years ago, before the internet, I read the names of all these children and grandchildren of these 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And I had a book that had these names in them, and the meanings of the names and where they settled. But I looked on an old map of Europe and Asia, and many of these names were in the rivers, the towns, the cities, the mountains. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And the names are still there. Like some of these names are still exist in these countries. So that just shows you they must have settled them and adopted their language. It says these are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. So it's not a myth. It says here. And then when he did Shem, Ham, and Japheth, it would say these are the sons of Japheth by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah according to their genealogies in their nations, and from these nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. And then I looked up one I was really interested in Japheth because his name meant far and extended and fair, which I assume meant fair. I assumed that meant the light-skinned people, so I got to looking them up and discovered the trek they took over the Carpathian Mountains and the Caucasus, and then looked up some of the modern maps of the Caucasus and found names of these people very, very similar to the sons of Japheth. So really, the Bible says these were the people that formed the nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies in their nations, and from these nations they spread abroad on the earth after the flood. And that's in Genesis 10, the last verse of Genesis 10. So it isn't a myth. Don't pay attention to some of these things like Wikipedia. So also in the Tower of Babel, it said, the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them all over the face of the earth. That's in Genesis chapter 11, verse 9. The Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. So, if you're following what the Bible says, this is how the nations began. And it's interesting when you start getting to study some of the languages of the time and the different nations, that they are somewhat connected. And we studied a little bit of Latin in our home school, which was quite interesting. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about something that I have been going through, all old magazines, old books, and deciding what to keep and what not to keep, and smelling them a little bit. And I have been going through Country Victorian. These were published in the 1980s and late 1990s. And they were supposed to be about Victorian houses and Victorian lifestyle and just Victorian cities and architecture, but they always had a historical account of some person that didn't make the history books but was there anyway, or something from someone's diary that lived in the Victorian times. And this was from an old magazine. They put it in these magazines, but unfortunately this has gotten so old that some of the pages have become brittle, so I didn't get the whole story of this. But it was about the anniversary of the death of the first and only emperor of America. And I thought, this sounds kind of strange. So, of course, I'm living in captivity. We're a bit touched now, so I get to read about these people. And this man's name was Emperor Norton. I'm trying to see what I had to read the rest of it online because some of the pages were gone. And his name was, trying to think, I think it was either Joshua or Jeremiah Norton. Oh, it's Joshua Abraham Norton. Okay, he was emperor, claimed to be emperor of America. He was born in, his dates are 1818 to 1880. He, I'll just summarize it and then read some of it from what this other lady has written. And every year, San Francisco celebrates the emperor, and they have a parade, and people dress up like the emperor. As a matter of fact, on YouTube, there are several people in an acting troupe that reenact Emperor Norton and do regular episodes of the things that of him, speeches that he made. And in this day and age, everybody needs to do something, and I applaud that. So 1818 to 1880, he was born in Britain, and then his family, when he was young, went to South Africa and made money in rice. And then there was the gold rush of San Francisco, and so he was a young man by then and already had enough wealth that he could travel. So he went to San Francisco and apparently lost his fortune because people were selling rice cheaper there, and he was stuck with all this rice. So I'll read to you about it. And there are just some interesting things is that I want to say to you about him before I start reading, is that he was accepted. Today would be considered, well, I don't know, maybe today he would be considered normal, but he was accepted by the people in San Francisco. They liked him, and everything that he did seemed to make them happy, and they were in uncertain times anyway. So he had some pretty good ideas, actually. He wanted to abolish Congress because he said they were so corrupt, and that, so I suppose today he just would have been called a conspiracy theorist. But anyway, this is what happened to him. If you've taken a walking tour of San Francisco, there's a good chance you've heard the name Emperor Norton. That was how Bay Curious listeners discovered him. Not much is known about Emperor Norton's early life. He was born Joshua Abraham Norton in 1818 in present-day London. At age 2, he moved with his parents to South Africa, where his dad set up a successful ship supplies business. At 21, with help from his father, Norton opened his own ship supplies business, but it went bankrupt within 18 months. Things went from bad to worse over the next few years. He took the brunt of lawsuits concerning this failed business. And by 1848, both of Norton's parents and 2 of his siblings had died. The following year, Norton left South Africa, and after a short stop in South America, landed in San Francisco in late 1849. Norton arrived in a lawless Wild West version of San Francisco. The gold rush transformed a small town of a few hundred people to a bustling metropolis of 25,000 within a few years. Can you imagine that happening? It was also a town of constant rebirth. People were making and losing their fortunes in the blink of an eye. The city was almost destroyed by fires 7 times between 1849 and 1851. Just making a little adjustment here. Norton, who had already built and lost a business in South Africa, fit right into this boom and bust town. He established himself as a successful businessman selling commodities like rice and flour. He invested in real estate, erecting buildings on 3 of the 4 corners of Sansom and Jackson Streets, one of the most popular intersections in town, plus plots in North Beach and a lucrative waterfront property. I wanted to show you, before I go much further, I wanted to show you a picture of him. Oh, goodness. And later on, he had, this doesn't have really good pictures, but later on, someone gave him a old military uniform and a hat, and he put colorful feathers in it, which is now the costume of Norton when they have their celebrations, when people want to reenact his life. Norton, who had already built and lost a business in South Africa, fit right into this boom and bust town. He established himself as a successful businessman selling commodities like rice and flour. He invested in real estate, erecting buildings on the 3 or 4 corners of the most popular intersections in town. He made a great amount of money and was very influential. He was in with all the right people, attended all the right clubs and all the right restaurants. Riding high, Norton planned his next business move. With a rice famine underway in China, Norton was presented with a chance to corner the rice market by buying up a shipload of Peruvian rice. Expecting rice prices to rise, Norton went in with a couple of business partners in 1852 and staked $25,000 on the venture. And then it all went wrong. Within a few days, ship after ship of rice came in, and so the bottom fell out of the market. This idea, which at one point seemed so great, now isn't so great. There were other people that were wanting to sell rice too. The deal and the subsequent years of legal wrangling ruined Norton. By the time Norton was 38, in 1856, he was bankrupt for the 2nd time. After his financial ruin, Norton went quiet for a few years. He moved out of his prestigious home and fell out of favor with some of the members of the social elite. He re-emerged on September 17, 1859, on the pages of the San Francisco Evening Bulletin newspaper. This is where the story becomes where the newspaper supported him and he supported the news for the newspaper, so they were helping each other. Earlier in the day, he had walked into the paper's offices and presented the editor with a short notice he asked to have published in that day's edition. At the peremptory request of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, this was the article he put in there. I, Joshua Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay, Cape of Good Hope, and now for the last 9 years and 10 months past of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States. The notice began, and there's a picture of the actual newspaper article. And see if I can read it. Proclaim myself Emperor of these United States, and in virtue of the authority thereby in me vested, do hereby order and direct the representative of the different states of the Union to assemble in musical hall of this city on the 1st day of February next, then and there to make much alterations in the laws of the Union as may alleviate the evils under which the country is laboring, and thereby increase confidence to exist both at home and abroad in our stability and integrity. Norton the First, Emperor of the United States, 17th September, 1859. At age 41, 3 years after losing everything, Norton christened himself Emperor of the United States. When Francis Napoleon III invaded Mexico in 1861, Norton added Protector of Mexico to his imperial title. This astonishing transformation has always fascinated Bay-curious listeners. One said, I majored in psychology, so I couldn't help thinking he must have had some kind of nervous breakdown. I was thinking bipolar, maybe. There are no sure answers about Norton's mental health before or after his imperial declaration. But some people think that his money troubles led him into a deep depression, and that becoming Emperor Norton was a coping mechanism. We all do stuff like that, don't we? Like, I have tea. I just have tea. It's a coping mechanism. And they actually, believe it was the governor at the time, had him arrested and sent him to a mental hospital. And the citizens of San Francisco were in such an uproar over it. They forced the governor to release him, and the governor, it was either the governor or the mayor, released him with an apology, with an official apology. He was not harmful, and the citizens loved him. You know, everybody needs a little brightness. There is a sense in which the persona of the emperor actually saved him in a way. Later in his declaration, Norton called on representatives of all states to assemble the following February to establish his empire and to make such alterations in the existing laws of the Union to alleviate the evils under which the country was laboring. Unsurprisingly, nobody showed up. He had a good idea there. People are talking about that all the time. But that didn't stop Norton. He had declared himself emperor, and he was going to act like it for the next 20 years. Norton continued issuing imperial proclamations in the newspapers on items like calling for the end of presidential elections, and large items like calling for the end of presidential elections, and small like chastising the skating rink operator who wouldn't let him use a pair of skates. Even though he was Emperor of the United States, his proclamations were often very local in nature. He didn't hesitate to call out San Francisco's police and elected officials. You know, he didn't like, the article I was reading in one of these magazines was that he didn't like people shortening the name of San Francisco to Frisco. He declared a law against it. Perhaps his most well-known proclamations were the ones calling for the construction of a bridge connecting Oakland and San Francisco through Yerba Buena Island, which we recognize today as Bay Bridge. Norton also adopted an imperial wardrobe. He started with either a blue or gray military jacket, switching between the two early in his reign to maintain his neutrality on the ongoing Civil War. After the war, he settled on a blue officer's jacket furnished with a large fringed golden shoulder epaulets. His balding head was almost always covered with a hat, most often a small military kepi or a garish beaver fur top hat with a cascade of colorful feathers pinned to the front. I'll try to include a link to someone who does a narrative on him that does a tour of San Francisco and talks about him. It's very interesting, and a picture of him with this hat. Being emperor did not pay very well. Norton spent most of his reign subsisting off the generosity of the public and the support of a few wealthy friends from his high society days. In 1870, with the newly completed Transcontinental Railroad bringing more tourists to San Francisco from across the country, Norton helped fill his coffers by selling imperial bonds for 50 cents each. He didn't need much money. His lodgings on Commercial Street cost him only 50 cents a night, and he spent most of his day reading the newspapers, talking with other 49ers in Portsmouth Square, and writing proclamations at the Mechanics' Institute Library on Post Street. Now, he printed his own money, and the people in San Francisco accepted it. He could go to any restaurant he wanted. He could stay anywhere he wanted, any hotel. And the people of San Francisco took his money, and they used it too. They could use it. It was just considered legal tender. I guess it doesn't much matter what you use. I don't suppose it was any more fake than our Federal Reserve notes, do you? For lunch, Norton could go to almost any tavern in town for the price of a drink, no more than 25 cents, get access to a full lunch spread of salmon, roast beef, tomatoes, and more. He made himself part of the city. He went to political meetings. He went to theater. He went to saloons. He made himself a public presence. And he's still in the streets. Someone made a statue of him. They also have little reminders and little tourist signs about him. The city's newspapers saw Norton as a bit of a buffoon and regularly published fake proclamations with his name attached. So in 1870, he started publishing his genuine proclamations almost exclusively in an African-American owned and operated abolitionist weekly, the Pacific Appeal. Now, I don't know if they told about it. I haven't completely read this article, but there was a riot in San Francisco between two sides of people. And he got in the middle of it and recited the Lord's Prayer over and over and over until the riot dispersed. And also the women's movement was really high. It was a political movement and women wanting to vote, which he really approved of. But then at one meeting he attended, he told the women he agreed with them, but they needed to go home and take care of their children. And it says there were many other things that he did. January 8, 1880 was a cold and rainy night in San Francisco. Norton left his room on Commercial Street to walk the few blocks to debate at the Academy of Natural Sciences. On his way there, he collapsed on the street and died of a stroke. 10,000 people came to Norton's funeral. The headline of the obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle read, "Le Roi est mort." Norton died with just a few dollars in his pockets and would have been sent to a pauper's grave if not for the intercessions of his old friends in business who paid for a fancy rosewood coffin adorned with silver and a burial plot in the cemetery. Even though often in the official world of journalism or politics he was somewhat seen as a figure of ridicule, to the people in the streets in that day who saw him on a day-to-day basis for 20 years, he was known as a very kind person. Almost 140 years after his death, Norton continues to captivate San Francisco. The Board of Supervisors designated February 2018 as Emperor Norton Month, and City Hall and Coit Tower lit up gold on February 4, 2018 in honor of Norton's 200th birthday. Nobody really encompasses the spirit of San Francisco better than the Emperor Norton, says Joseph Amster, one of the two men who walks the streets of San Francisco as official Norton impersonators. Now I want to show you, they reenact it, and these are Norton impersonators, and they know all his script by heart and all his edicts and all his newspaper articles. So I wanted to show you a picture of one of the men that does, has that pretty hat, you know, with the feathers in it, and they're all quite serious. These are actors, and they're all quite serious about this reenactment. Guests come dressed in their 19th century finest, from the Wild West leather chaps to Victorian dresses, to honor Norton. And so someone said, "You have so many presidents," and this was a Japanese author. He said, "You have so many." He came to the reenactment. He said, "You have so many presidents, but no emperor in history. But people admire him as emperor." To many people at the annual party across the city, Norton represents the best of the Bay Area, an advocate of fairness and tolerance, a kind person, and a bit of an oddball. And there are people that whose parents and grandparents helped erect plaques and statues about him. So I thought that was interesting. Now, my kids had read about this when they were still in homeschool, because I had these magazines around, and thought it was quite curious, but it never made it into, quote, any official government history books. Well, you know, we're not going to be in a government history book either. So there's history out there that that has been suppressed or hidden, and I thought that was interesting. I thought it was great the way he stood up for people too. He had 2 dogs, and apparently San Francisco was just overrun with dogs at the time, and so I'll leave the link to the video that this man talks about these dogs that were very loyal and faithful to him, and people didn't like dogs in San Francisco at all, but these ones were allowed to go with him into the restaurants, so he was quite progressive at the time. Now, ladies, he talked about the Civil War in here, and how he didn't want to take sides, and he wanted to meet with all the congressmen, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about Jefferson Davis next time. Some of the things that you will not read about in quote official government history, but some of the things that people have found out from letters and diaries and friends, but you would find very, very interesting. Now, I want to get on to dealing with people. Now, this man that I just read about seems rather eccentric, but people just treated him with such love and kindness, and you know, I suppose he did become emperor just to cope. You know, he had to have some way to earn a living after he'd lost his fortune, and this probably seemed the most lucrative to him. But we used to be able to sit in a group with other women or just other families, and we knew that we were all different from each other. Like, I would go visit someone who had invited a bunch of ladies over, and she had her whole house decorated in country western. She had horses and all around, like pictures and John Wayne stuff all around, and I wouldn't think that I couldn't be her friend, because I didn't enjoy it myself in my own home, but she was different from me, and we appreciated each other's differences, but didn't mean if you didn't decorate your house that way that you hated what she was doing. With cancel culture, that's all changed. They make the rules, and they say, you know, if you don't agree with something, you can't be friends with me. And so you get these people now that are so absorbed in this cancel culture. I call it cultural Marxism. Is that and this began quite a long time ago, but it's become more prominent now, is that they will suddenly change their personalities that you maybe had known for years, and they never said a cross word to you, and all of a sudden turn into someone who's on attack. And it began years ago when people used to hang up on you with the phone. That was considered very dramatic. You know, they like to do that. And then they get you calling them back and desperate to know what was wrong. Then they wouldn't answer, and they'd have you going. And so this is just another way. This is just another, we're talking about personalities. I like to add personalities and dealing with people at the end of every video, because we are, as homemakers, going to be with our families or be with some of the more eccentric ones. They're going to call you a conspiracy theorist if you don't live exactly the way they like or they approve of. And so I thought maybe I would talk a little bit about it. Everybody likes this part. But we used to be able to sit around with people and we knew, you know, they were a little bit off sometimes, but we didn't. We just enjoyed having them. We enjoyed just the fellowship, just being together. And they don't. We've got a lot of quirky people in these small towns and small churches. We have so much fun with them, and really enjoy each other. And they like to tease each other, even at church here. It's a small church, and everybody's got their little foibles, you know. And we like to tease. There's a one couple that comes in late all the time, and they'll come in while we're singing the first song, the opening song. And sometimes we will wait for them. The whole congregation will wait for them. And then when they come in, we will all congratulate them. And we just enjoy each other so much, but nobody takes offense, you know. So we used to be able to accept other people the way they were without endorsing everything that they did. And it's the same with, you know, like I'm going to put a link to a video on about this Emperor Norton. And you're going to go look at this man's videos and then his playlist, and you're probably going to see something you don't like. But just kind of don't get caught up in the tiny little details of everything, and enjoy the major story. So people sometimes will have a sudden change in their attitude, and you're not prepared for it. You didn't detect it. And other people will say, well, now that's unusual. Why would they blow up at you? They've never done that before. But here's what happens. I think I've explained this to you. Their character is not fully developed. And when things are going nice for them, and there's no hardship in their life, the world isn't so crazy, and politically everything's going nice for them, they can be nice, and they ride on the crest of your niceness and your politeness, and they're fine. But the minute that it's not going well for them, and maybe it's going well for you, or maybe you've become a little more independent from them, then they break out into this terrible temper, and you're astonished. You're like, what happened? You just didn't expect it at all. Well, it's a way of control, and they also may be on some kind of pharmaceutical too that maybe they haven't taken or tried to get off of, or having a reaction to, or maybe they're on alcohol. We don't know. People lose their inhibitions when they're on drugs or alcohol, and can say and do things that you think are totally out of character for them. Or not just that, but maybe they're into, if it's a young man or an older man, they're into video games or something, that can trigger their temper too. And so we don't know what it is. The only thing we really need to know is that it's not nice, it's not polite, it's rude, it's and the Bible talks about against it too, you know, to be self-controlled, to control your temper, and that sort of thing. So we know that it's wrong. We can spend a lot of time trying to analyze it and trying to get to the bottom of it. But basically, I think what you need to understand is if they did it and they're not explaining it, and they're leaving you hanging there, blowing in the wind, you know they have done something that's not nice. And I mean, you just need to know that. But I think most of us like to question ourselves and say, if this person got mad at me and nobody else seems to think that they've done that before, then maybe it was something I did. And they'll tell you that it was your fault because they've never, ever done that before. But the fact is, these people are hiding something. The fact that they would do that means they have done it before, but you just don't detect it and you don't know it. And they've hid it from a lot of people. When things are going well, they are guided by your politeness. They're guided by your sensibility. But when things start to fall through for them in many ways, or maybe you're not completely cooperating with them, then they will blow up at you. And I think it's really important that you declare your independence from people who decide to cut you off of the phone, cut you off of, shut the door on you sort of thing. Just declare yourself independent. Give yourself a declaration of independence from people who are rude, who cut you off. And I know that the modern psychologists used to like to call this a they instead of admitting what it is, it's just a rude meanness. They called it a personality conflict. That's what they started doing when it came to rudeness and sin. As if someone was mean or objected to, or somebody else objected to their meanness, they say, "Oh, you two have a personality conflict," but that's not true. There is a character problem there. Someone has a character problem, and so I just wanted to, they're not growing in grace, because the Bible says grow in grace. And there was a scripture I was reading the other day in one of our ladies' Bible classes, and it said not to quarrel, not to be quarreling. And so these people want to start something. They want to start a quarrel, and they want you running after them too. They want you to beg them to explain what you did and what happened. And it could be you did absolutely nothing, but they want to put you in a situation where you feel like you're hanging between, you can't settle down mentally. So you need to declare your independence from them. And remember that they are flawed and that they are not fully developed. So, ladies, I hope you have get a lot done, and I hope you will go and look at this Norton guy if you're curious about it. It's not really necessary, but in homeschool, we try to be open-minded, and we look for other avenues of information, not just the, even though I ordered Christian school books that had history in it, we always try to go a little bit further and find a little bit more about something, or other things that were happening at the same time. Not all history has been recorded, but some of it has been written about, not officially recorded, but some of it has been written about, like this interesting man. So I thought you might be amused by that and have something to work with, listen to while you made a bed, while you cleaned a closet, while you cut up some vegetables, cleaned the kitchen, etc. I am going to be busy today. I am not going to be able to do a lot of the things I wanted to do, but we have a big day tomorrow. So I will talk to you later, and God bless you, and I love you, and please leave a comment. Thank you. Bye.